What if I told you that the very act of setting your purse, your wallet, your briefcase on the floor was the first spiritual signature on a contract you never meant to sign? A contract that cedes authority over your prosperity, not to a bank, not to the economy, but to them. My name is Elias Vance. For over 2 decades, I wasn't just a member of the Satanic Inner Circle. I was the architect of operations designed to make you an unwitting participant in your own financial and spiritual stagnation. We called it the grounding protocol, and it works not through dark magic spells in hidden rooms, but through the open, subtle manipulation of universal spiritual principles. Principles your faith knows are real, but you perhaps never weaponized in your own defense. Today, I am breaking my final oath to expose this. What you dismiss as an old wives' tale is, in fact, a deliberate systemic spiritual attack vector. By the end of this, you will understand not just why you should pick your purse off the floor, but how this simple act is a keystone in a vast strategy to keep you in a vibration of lack, under a spirit of mammon, and under their authority. The battle for your destiny is fought over inches, the distance between the floor and your chair. I have sat in strategy rooms where we mapped the cultural adoption of these superstitions. We didn't create them all, but we curated, amplified, and embedded them in media and fashion blogs in the mindset of hustle culture to make them seem harmless, even quirky. A funny meme about being broke with a purse on the floor. A stylish photo in a magazine with a bag casually dropped by the doorstep. This was not accidental. It was seeding. It was normalization. Miss this understanding, and you fundamentally misunderstand the playing field upon which your spiritual and financial life is contested. You are reacting to shadows while the substance of the strategy unfolds in your own living room, in your own daily habits. This is why you must subscribe to this channel right now. Consider this your direct intelligence briefing from behind enemy lines. While they plot in the shadows, this channel turns on the lights. Every video you receive is not just information. It is a tactical tool, a step out of the maze they have spent generations constructing around your mind, your home, your blessings. Your subscription is your first act of deliberate defiance against a campaign of calculated ignorance. Let me build my credibility with you, not through boasts, but through a glimpse into the machinery. I held the title of Dominion of Strategic Psychic Infiltration for a branch of the occult known to insiders as the Order of the Midnight Sun. My department's mandate was not to summon demons to your bedside. That's crude, inefficient, and attracts too much immediate spiritual resistance. No. Our work was far more elegant and far more effective. We engineered consent. We designed environments and encouraged habits that would lead you willingly, subtly, to place yourself under spiritual jurisdictions you would never consciously choose. One of my early assignments, a proof of concept, was targeted at a specific, prosperous faith community in a Midwestern city. Our objective was not to bankrupt them overnight. That would have been an obvious spiritual attack, rallying them to prayer. Our objective was subtler, to induce a consistent, low-grade frequency of financial irritation. A series of small losses, unexpected repairs, delayed payments, and nagging debts that would, over a single quarter, drain their collective spiritual energy and focus away from the outreach programs they were funding. The metric for success was a 10% increase in what we called financial friction incidents, without a single believer attributing it to anything but bad luck or personal mismanagement. And the primary symbolic trigger we seeded in that community? It started with a simple, casual disrespect for the symbols of provision. We influenced a popular local blogger to write a piece on letting go of material hang-ups, featuring beautifully staged photos of cluttered entryways with bags on the floor, presented as authentic, busy life. It worked better than any ritual. You see the principle at play is what we in the order called the spiritual law of placement. It is a twisted parody of a divine truth. In your scriptures, you are told you are seated in heavenly places with Christ. Elevation, authority, dominion. From a high place, you see clearly you rule. Our entire counter-strategy is based on the inverse, to bring down what is meant to be raised up, to ground what is meant to be seated in authority. Think about it. Where do you place things you discard, things you consider worthless, dirty, common? You place them on the floor. Where do you place things you honor, things of value, things you are actively using? You raise them up, on a table, on a shelf, in your hand. This is not just practicality, it is embedded spiritual logic. Your wallet, your purse is not merely a container for receipts and cash. In the spiritual realm, it is a prosperity sigil. It is the physical point of contact for the covenant of provision in your life. It is the tangible representation of your faith for daily bread, for overflow, for the resources to fulfill your calling. When you treat that sigil with disregard, When you toss it on the floor, kick it under the chair, let it wallow in the dust and debris of the world, what message are you broadcasting from your spirit into the spiritual atmosphere? You are declaring, through silent, powerful symbolism, that you consider your provision common, low, and subject to the grime of the world's system. You are, in effect, placing your wealth under the authority of the prince of the power of the air who operates in the earthly realm because you have physically and symbolically brought it low. But this is where most people get stuck on the superficial level. Okay, I'll put my purse on a chair. That's a good start, a necessary first step, but if you think that's the whole battle, you've already lost the war. The grounding protocol is fractal. It operates on multiple levels simultaneously. The physical act is just the anchor point. The real victory for us was in the psychic agreement it created within you. That moment of nonchalance, that lack of conscious care, that subtle belief that it's just a purse, it doesn't matter, is the real entry point. We weren't just after your money. We were after your mindfulness. We sought to cultivate within you a state of spiritual drowsiness regarding the connection between the physical and the spiritual realms of your finances. Once that agreement of carelessness is in place, it becomes a gateway for other more corrosive thoughts, a mindset that says money is dirty, a belief that I'm just bad with finances, a resignation that there's never enough. That purse on the floor is the first brick in a prison of lack consciousness, and every time you walk past it without a thought, you are mortaring another brick into place. You are training your own spirit to accept diminishment. And I can tell you from the plans I authored, the moment we see that a target has accepted that first, seemingly innocuous symbol of disregard, we greenlight the next phase of engagement. We move from general seeding to specific temptations tailored to your unique weaknesses. Imagine, if you will, the spiritual realm as a court of law. Your actions, your habits are entered as evidence. Your faith-filled declarations are powerful testimony for your case. But your unconscious symbolic acts are also entered into the record, often by the opposition. Placing your wealth on the floor is entered as Exhibit A by the prosecution, suggesting you do not value or honor the provision you have been given. It is used to argue for the continuation of a restriction, a blockage, a limitation. The case against your financial breakthrough isn't just based on your past mistakes or some generational curse. It is being reinforced daily by the quiet, symbolic testimonies of your own habits. And the adversary is a masterful attorney, capitalizing on every piece of evidence you carelessly provide. He will use that one symbol to weave a narrative. See, even they treat their blessing with contempt. They are not ready for more. They would not be faithful stewards of increase. This is the legalistic aspect of spiritual warfare that few truly grasp. It's not a screaming match in the darkness. It's a meticulous building of a case for limitation in the unseen realms. And the first piece of evidence we always looked for, the easiest to obtain, was the placement of the prosperity sigil. But let me be clear, this is not a message of fear. This is a message of profound empowerment. Because now you are no longer an ignorant participant in these proceedings. Now you can become a conscious advocate for your own destiny. You can retake the stand and enter new evidence. So what is the counter move? It begins, yes, with picking the purse up. But it must continue with a conscious, intentional recalibration of your entire relationship with the symbols of provision in your life. Later, we will delve into the full reclamation protocol, the specific authoritative steps to not only break this agreement, but to establish a new, unshakable one of sovereign stewardship. But the seed must be planted now. The recognition must dawn. Your wallet is not just a wallet. It is an artifact of your covenant. Your purse is not just an accessory. It is a container for potential kingdom assignments. The money within it is not just paper, it is potential energy for good, for gospel advancement, for generational blessing. When you see it that way, the thought of letting it slump on the floor near the dirt from your shoes becomes unthinkable. It would be like placing the title deed to your promised land in the mud. This is the mindset shift that dismantles the entire grounding protocol at its root. It moves you from superstition to strategy, from avoidance to authority. And this is merely the first protocol, the most basic entry point in a vast playbook designed to keep you from your destiny. The fact that you are even hearing this means a line has been crossed in the spiritual, and your attention has been drawn to this front for a reason. The next phase of their strategy, which works in tandem with this one, involves what we called energetic transfer objects, common items in your home that you handle daily, believing them to be neutral, but which are being used to siphon your spiritual vitality and cloud your discernment, ensuring you never muster the focus to even notice where you placed your purse. That is where we must turn our attention next. That second, more insidious phase, the one involving what we termed energetic transfer objects, is where the grounding protocol truly blossoms into a systemic web. You see, an isolated symbol is powerful, but it can be dismissed. A chain of agreeing symbols, however, creates a circuit, and a completed circuit creates a sustained current, a frequency that your spirit begins to vibrate with day in and day out. Think of your purse on the floor as the first node in that circuit. The moment you accept that node through unconscious habit, the rest of the grid begins to power up around you, often using items you believe to be completely inert, even beneficial. Let me give you a clearer picture from the inside. After my success with that initial community operation, I was promoted to oversee a broader campaign targeting a specific demographic, the creative class and the faithful entrepreneurs. These individuals were dangerous to us. Why? Because they possessed the potential for divinely inspired innovation and independent wealth creation. Wealth that could flow directly into kingdom ventures outside our controlled systems. Our goal was not to crush their spirit, but to cap their output, to keep them in a state of productive struggle, where they were just busy enough, just stressed enough to never achieve the catalytic overflow that would fund a revolution. We propagated this through carefully crafted cultural narratives. We championed minimalist design not for its peace, but for its potential to hide and diminish the symbols of provision. We promoted beautiful, sterile homes and magazines where money was literally invisible. No wallets on display, no cash in jars, just sleek hidden drawers and digital numbers on a screen. Disembodied, abstract, and crucially, disconnected from a physical sense of blessing. We encourage the hustle culture gospel that glorifies burning the candle at both ends, that treats the body, God's temple, and the tools of one's trade with a utilitarian disdain. A designer would treat their expensive computer with care, but their actual purse, the thing that bought the coffee that fueled the all-nighter, would be a stuffed, frayed afterthought tossed onto a chaotic desk. This was the web. The wallet on the floor was just the beginning. The clutter on the entryway table, the mountain of unopened mail mixed with car keys and loose change, the chaotic junk drawer that held bills, each of these is an agreement point. Each is a silent altar you are building, not to God, but to the spirit of confusion, obstruction, and delay. We measured success by the density of these points in a person's environment. A cluttered entryway wasn't just messy, it was, in our tactical reports, a high-yield spiritual congestion zone. It meant the person was living in reaction, not intention, and a person in reaction is easy to manipulate. Let's break down why this web is so effective, moving beyond the single symbol. Clutter and chaos are not morally wrong, they are spiritually strategic. Disorder in your physical space creates a corresponding static in your spiritual perception. It fatigues the mind and scatters focus. When your financial instruments, bills, bank statements, your purse, are embedded in that chaos, you are training yourself to associate your provision with stress, overwhelm, and disorder. You dread dealing with it. You avoid opening that envelope. You toss the purse on the pile because the very sight of the pile is draining. This is the psychic infiltration at work. You have been led to believe the problem is your lack of organization, when the deeper truth is that you are under a spiritual strategy to make you averse to the management of your own blessing. The enemy doesn't need you to be poor, he needs you to be too mentally and spiritually fatigued to be a faithful, intentional steward of what you have. Because a faithful steward, even with little, is a terrifying force of growth. The chaos altar also blocks the flow of new blessings. Imagine a pipe meant to channel water. If the mouth of the pipe is clogged with debris, old bills, unresolved decisions, symbolic neglect, how can new, fresh provision flow in? It can't. It backs up. The new blessing is held in suspension, waiting for you to clear the channel. And every day you walk past that cluttered table, you are adding another piece of debris to the pile. Then there is the clever counterfeit of the virtue of humility. This is a master stroke in the strategy, and one I helped refine. The enemy is adept at twisting sacred truths into crippling lies. Humility is a cornerstone of your faith, but we work to morph it in the minds of believers into a poverty mindset that whispers, "Who are you to have a beautiful, organized space for your finances?" That's prideful. Who are you to treat your wallet like a sacred object? That's materialism. Just be humble, be grateful for what you have, and stop wanting order or elevation. This is a diabolical lie. True God-honoring humility is about recognizing that everything you have is a trust from Him. And how do you treat a sacred trust? With utmost care, with order, with intentionality. You don't treat a priceless, borrowed masterpiece by throwing it in a corner. You place it on a stand, you clean it, you protect it. To treat your provision, a sacred trust from God with disregard is not humility. It is negligence, and it borders on contempt for the gift and the giver. The web ensnares you by making you feel spiritually superior for your neglect, for your lack of attachment to material things, while all along you are violating the principle of stewardship. You are not detached from mammon. You are being passively ruled by it through the chaos it encourages. This is the depth of the deception. You believe you are walking in humility, when you are actually walking in agreement with a spirit of lack that blocks the very abundance that could fuel God's work through you. Now, connect this to the broader wealth anchors I mentioned. The purse on the floor is a physical anchor, but there are behavioral and verbal anchors that complete the circuit. Late payment of your tithes. That is not just a financial decision. In our strategic view, it was a primary anchor. It is the act of taking what is legally and covenantally holy, what is meant to be elevated to God first, and holding it back, keeping it grounded in your own account, often because of fear or that disordered chaos. You are literally grounding the holy portion, speaking curses over your income. I'm always broke. Money just slips through my fingers. I'm bad with finances. These are not just words. They are vocal affirmations that align your spirit with the reality you are complaining about. They are you bearing witness against yourself in that spiritual court. And finally, the idolatry of either miserliness or reckless spending. Both are sides of the same coin of fear. The hoarder is terrified of lack, so they clutch and hide, blocking flow. The reckless spender is terrified of never having enough again, so they consume to prove a false abundance. Both are controlled by the spirit of mammon, and both behaviors create powerful anchors that keep wealth from fulfilling its divine purpose, to flow through you as a blessing. So, if I were in your home today, not as an enemy, but as a friend who knows the blueprints, what would I look for? I wouldn't first ask about your prayer life. I would observe. I would look for the physical nodes in the web. Where do you drop your keys, your mail, your bag when you come in? Is it a place of honor or a dumping ground? I would glance at your desk, your kitchen counter. Are the tools of your provision buried? I would listen not to your prayers, but to your casual complaints about money. Each observation is a data point. And from my old playbook, I would be able to triangulate your primary vulnerability. For some, it's the chaos of clutter. A simple, systematic clearing would cause a seismic shift in their spiritual climate. For others, it's the internal narrative of lack. A shift in declaration would begin to shatter the anchor. For most, it's a combination, a web they've been living in for years, wondering why their financial life feels under a constant low-grade siege, why breakthroughs seem to always be just out of reach, why they feel perpetually grounded in struggle. The goal was never to make you destitute. That often backfires, driving people to desperate faith-fueled prayer. The goal was the managed struggle, the constant draining friction that wastes your most precious resource, your spiritual and mental focus diverting it from kingdom advancement to mere survival. Knowing the extent of this web is the necessary step before you can begin to dismantle it. But understanding the web is only half the victory. The other half, the more chilling half, requires you to understand the true grand objective. It wasn't just to steal your peace or your money, it was to neutralize your entire kingdom purpose, to keep you from funding what you are truly called to do. And this leads to the most guarded secret in my former department, the kingdom delay tactic, where your personal financial friction is merely a single gear in a much larger machine aimed at something far greater than your bank account, the kingdom delay tactic. This is where the true scale of the operation comes into focus, and where you must understand that your personal financial friction is not an isolated event. It is a designed, intentional outcome with a strategic purpose far exceeding your individual comfort. In the high-level briefings, we did not discuss individuals by name. We discussed them as assets, as yield potentials, as points of spiritual leverage. Your personal struggle with bills, that nagging sense of lack, the constant repair that drains your savings, these were not the end goals. They were the mechanisms. The ultimate objective was always macro, to cripple the forward momentum of the kingdom of light on earth by systematically targeting its resource engine. You, the believer, in your role as a steward and financier of heaven's agenda. Let me frame it in the cold terminology of my old world. We had a classification system. Believers living in blatant sin were low-priority assets. They were already in containment. The devout but poverty-minded believers enmeshed in webs of neglect like we just described were classified as managed assets. Their output was capped, their potential channeled into mere sustenance. But the truly dangerous ones, the ones that sparked emergency protocols, were those we called unrestricted catalysts. These were individuals who, regardless of their current account balance, had made the spiritual and practical connection between their provision and God's mission. They treated their finances with reverence and strategy. They gave not out of leftovers, but with first fruits intentionality. They saw money as a unit of spiritual energy to be deployed. These people got a different file. Their label was direct confrontation required, and the meetings about them were longer, more tense, and involved far more complex intervention plans. Think of it as a spiritual war economy. Every kingdom runs on supply lines. You can have the most brilliant generals, the most courageous soldiers, but if the supply lines of food, ammunition, and intelligence are cut, the army starves and stalls. In this spiritual war, the local church's outreach, the missionary in the field, the family funding and adoption, the person quietly helping a neighbor in crisis, these are the front lines. And their supply lines run directly through the faithfulness of believers like you. Our strategic goal was not to attack the front line directly, which would only galvanize resistance. No, our goal was to sabotage the supply lines, to create enough friction in the lives of 10,000 believers that the collective resource pool for kingdom ventures would diminish, that big visions would be scaled back to safe projects, that the missionary would have to come home early, that the outreach event would be underfunded, that the family in crisis would not receive timely help because the person who could have helped was too consumed with their own financial emergency. This is the kingdom delay. It is death by 1,000 tiny, untraceable cuts to the body's circulatory system. Your personal feeling of scarcity is the intended localized symptom of a systemic spiritual blood loss affecting the entire body of Christ. When you are stressed about money, you are not thinking about funding the Bible translation project. You're thinking about the car payment. When you are buried in clutter and disorder, you do not have the mental bandwidth to hear the Holy Spirit's nudge to give to a specific need. You are overwhelmed by your own pile of mail. This is not an accident. This is by design. Your focus has been successfully captured and held hostage by a manufactured crisis. I recall with stark clarity a specific quarterly review. I was presenting the metrics for a region. The slide showed not dollar amounts, but percentages of discretionary spiritual resource diversion. One graph tracked the increase in median credit card debt among church-going families in a target area. Another tracked the decline in special beyond tithe offerings reported by a sample of churches in that same area. The correlation was not perfect, but it was strong enough to draw a satisfied nod from my superiors. The memo I wrote afterwards stated, "The asset pool is successfully self-regulating. Increased personal financial pressure is resulting in decreased risky their term for faith-based generosity. The pipeline is constricting." That was the language. You were an asset pool. Your financial pressure was a self-regulating mechanism for us. Your generosity was risky, and we were constricting the pipeline. This is the chilling, dehumanizing calculus that governed our actions. Your pain had a purpose in our plans to make you turn inward, to force your vision down from the horizon of kingdom possibility to the narrow, dusty patch of floor at your own feet. Now, let's break down the core of the kingdom delay tactic, the three pillars upon which it stands. The first, as we've discussed, is the shift from lack to neutralization. Lack can provoke desperate, fervent prayer that sometimes breaks through. Neutralization is more insidious. It's the state of just enough. You have just enough to keep you comfortable enough not to truly wail on the altar, but never enough to be truly dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. You're fed, housed, and distracted. You're not in famine, so you don't seek manna with a desperate hunger. You're in the wilderness, circling the same mountain, your resources perpetually depleting and refilling just enough to keep you circling. This state neutralizes your prophetic voice, your daring faith, your ability to fund the outrageous God-sized vision. You become spiritually conservative, financially cautious, and your primary warfare becomes defensive, praying against your bills rather than decreeing for the funding of a revolution. The second pillar is the blocking of the covenantal flow. Your finances are a primary covenant channel. Malachi chapter 3 is not just about obedience, it's about a systemic spiritual principle of flow and return. The tithe is the recognition of the covenant. The offering is the investment into it. When this channel is blocked by neglect, by fear, by disorder, by that purse on the floor, it is not merely that you miss a blessing. It is that a specific, intended blessing from God to you and then through you to a specific point of need in the body of Christ is rerouted, delayed, or lost. That missionary who didn't get the extra funds for the vehicle repair, that might be connected. The community fridge that couldn't be stocked, that might be part of the blockage. We understood this flow on a metaphysical level. We couldn't stop God from releasing blessing, but we could, through the agreements you made in carelessness and fear, create spiritual silt in your channel, slowing the flow to a trickle, ensuring the blessing arrived too late or was absorbed entirely by your own leaky bucket of managed struggle. The third pillar and the most spiritually profound is the wealth under authority paradigm we engineered. This is the ultimate aim of the grounding protocol and the entire web. When your wealth, the symbol and substance of it, is habitually placed under the physical authority of the dust, the dirt, the common floor, the world system, you are training your spirit to place it under the spiritual authority of the ruler of that world system. It is a daily physical act of submission to a lower jurisdiction. Consequently, that wealth cannot be fully placed under and directed by the higher authority of the kingdom of God. It is spiritually contested territory. It is like trying to launch a satellite with a rocket that's still tethered to the ground. The engine fires, strains, it consumes fuel, but it never achieves orbit. It never breaks into the realm where it can function as designed. Your financial striving feels this way because, in a very real spiritual sense, it is this way. The wealth is under an authority that legislates lack, limitation, and hoarding. Until you consciously, deliberately, and symbolically reestablish under whose authority your provision operates, you will be fighting against a spiritual legal precedent every single day. I remember the palpable tension in one particular strategy session focused on a single, unrestricted catalyst, a businessman who had begun to funnel serious capital into underground church networks in closed countries. He was not a pastor, he was a steward. Our surveillance on his habits showed no obvious points of entry: a clean home, orderly finances, deliberate generosity. The frustration in the room was tangible. Then, a junior analyst presented a finding. This man had one habit: he would, when deeply tired after long trips, drop his briefcase, the very one that often carried confidential donation paperwork, just inside his front door. Not on a table, on the floor, for a few hours until he unpacked. It was a tiny crack, born of fatigue, not disregard. But it was enough. The order was given not to attack his health or his business directly, but to amplify his fatigue, to increase the frequency, duration of his travels, to make that briefcase sit on the floor longer and more often, to see if we could wear down that 1 point of disciplined stewardship into a habit of unconscious submission. We were seeking to downgrade him from a catalyst to a managed asset. That is how precise, how relentless, and how targeted this warfare can be. Your one small point of weariness, your one cluttered corner, is all that is needed to initiate a strategy of delay against your destiny. This is the gravity of what you are facing. But knowledge is not meant to paralyze, it is meant to mobilize. Understanding the true objective, the delay of God's kingdom through the sabotage of its resource channels, changes everything. It turns your personal budget from a source of stress into a field of strategic engagement. And it makes what I must share with you next not a self-help tip, but a critical counterintelligence operation. Because I did not defect empty-handed. I brought with me the exact step-by-step protocols we feared most, the systematic dismantling of our work. What I am about to outline is the precise reclamation protocol that would trigger the highest level of alert within my former department. This is how you sever the anchors, clear the channel, and transfer your wealth back under the only authority that can unleash its full world-altering power, the reclamation protocol. This is the counter-operation. This is what we, in the order, feared not as a generalized prayer, but as a systematic, intelligent undoing of our work. It is the difference between randomly swatting at sparks and cutting the main power line to the incendiary device. If you have understood the depth of the strategy, that it is a web of agreements, a legalistic case for limitation, and a tactical delay of kingdom advance, then you know that your response must be equally systematic, equally intelligent, and grounded in a higher authority. This is not about superstition, it is about spiritual sovereignty. So if I were you, standing in my own home with this new intelligence, I would not move in a frenzy of fear, tossing my purse onto the nearest shelf as if it were a live grenade. No, I would move with the deliberate, calm precision of a master systems administrator who has just identified a critical breach. I would go to that purse, that wallet, that briefcase. I would pick it up. But I would not just pick it up with my hand, I would lift it with my authority. I would say aloud, with a tone not of pleading but of declaration, this representation of my covenant provision is under the authority of Jesus Christ. It is seated with him in heavenly places. It is blessed to be a blessing. Any unconscious agreement with lack, neglect, or foreign authority is now severed in his name. That single conscious verbal act is not a magic spell. It is a legal filing in the spiritual court. It is you entering a motion to dismiss the case against your prosperity based on evidence of neglect. It is you serving notice of a change in jurisdiction. This is the first and most critical step of the protocol, the conscious reclamation of symbols. You must go on a deliberate audit, not next week, today. You are declaring, my trust is not in the money I hold, but in the God who provides. This channel is open, and I will prove it by releasing flow. Give to that missionary you've been thinking about. Bless that family in secret. Overtip the waitress and tell her God sees her. The amount is between you and God, but the act must be intentional and faith-stretching. This single act of sovereign release does more to dismantle the spiritual machinery of lack than 1,000 prayers muttered in anxiety. It is you taking wealth that was under the authority of fear and placing it directly under the authority of love, proving to your own spirit and to the principalities and powers that the channel is, in fact, open and operational. The third and ongoing phase is the establishment of declarative sovereignty. This is your new daily maintenance protocol. The old agreement was one of unconscious neglect. The new agreement must be one of conscious verbal stewardship. You must institute a practice. Every morning when you pick up your wallet or your purse, you speak a blessing over it. Not a vague God bless my money, but a specific purposeful declaration. Today, the resources you carry will navigate the world's system under divine authority. You will attract divine opportunities for increase. You will be a source of blessing to everyone I encounter. You are protected, you are directed, and you are multiplied according to the covenant. When you pay a bill, you do not do it with resentment. You do it with declaration. I cancel any claim of the enemy over this transaction. This payment releases the service I need and establishes my testimony as a faithful steward. You are now bearing witness for yourself in the spiritual court. You are entering a daily affidavit of faith, stewardship, and kingdom alignment. This practice rewires your subconscious mind from a frequency of lack to a frequency of sovereign stewardship. It makes the thought of dropping your purse on the floor feel as unnatural and disrespectful as throwing a Bible in the mud. It elevates your entire consciousness regarding provision. This is the sustained, rhythmic counteroffensive that prevents re-infiltration. It is the daily spiritual hygiene that keeps the channels clear and the jurisdiction firmly established under heaven's authority. Now, you understand why this channel, this intelligent stream, is vital. What I have just given you is the protocol for one file, one operation, the grounding protocol, and its related kingdom delay tactic. But my former department has thousands of active files. They have protocols for attacking health through subtle agreements in your food choices, for undermining relationships through the entertainment you consume, for clouding discernment through the very technology you hold in your hand. Your subscription here is not for my benefit. It is your declaration that you refuse to remain on the casualty reports. You are choosing to be on intelligence receipt. Every time a notification from this channel appears on your phone, it is a spiritual early warning system. It is a flash briefing on the next strategy being deployed in the invisible war. It puts you a step ahead, not a prayer behind. You must share this with every believer you know, not to spread fear, but to build an informed, unified front. Our strength was in your ignorance. Your strength will be in our shared, revealed knowledge. Share this video. Break the cycle of silent, solitary struggle. Create a network of spiritually sovereign stewards who understand that their daily lives are the battlefield and their habits are their weapons. This is the essence of the defection protocol, to turn their own strategies into your roadmap to freedom. You now possess the first crucial key. You know how to reclaim your prosperity sigils, consecrate your flow, and establish daily sovereignty. But I must leave you with this final, urgent question, a question that points to the next major front in this war. We have spoken of objects you own, purses, wallets, clutter. But what about the objects you are given? The ones that enter your home as gifts, as purchases, even as decorations? What if I told you that the enemy's most potent energetic transfer objects are not your neglected items, but the ones you actively welcome, cherish, and display? The beautiful painting from the thrift store, the antique jewelry, the stylish furniture, even the children's toy from a well-meaning relative. What spiritual signatures do they carry? What agreements are you unknowingly hosting? How is your home, your sanctuary, being used as a gallery for cursed objects that siphon peace, health, and unity while you sleep? This is the next protocol we must expose. The infiltration is not just through your neglect, but through your trust. Until then, walk in the conscious, powerful sovereignty you have just reclaimed. Pick it up, speak over it, release it. You are no longer a managed asset. You are an unrestricted catalyst. Now, go and act like one.